want to give you a little bit of an overview of RAICA for those of you that aren't familiar with us. So if you could go to the next slide, please, Mary. One back. So we'll go over who RAICA is, and then we'll go over who GreenSpark is. A little presentation about solar, and particularly solar in the Rochester area, with lots of great examples of projects that were done locally. A little bit of a case study at a house of worship, and then plenty of time for questions and answers. So we'll go to the next slide. Rochester Area Interfaith Climate Action is a group of individuals and organizations of faith in the Rochester metropolitan area, seeking to create a meaningful response to climate change. In doing so, we acknowledge our common conviction to share for the earth and its people. And working together, we seek to share resources, leverage our strengths, and magnify our positive impact. So go to the next one. We really work in 3 different ways. We try and connect people to each other, to reliable sources of information, to local experts. We encourage collaboration, working together through webinars like this, our summit when we can be in person, our website to share best practices, acting as ambassadors and a conduit to exchange information, support each other, and provide inspiration. And then we also try and coordinate our efforts to amplify our impact and through collective action. So whether we're advocating for some particular policy, or we are trying to implement a campaign across several different sites. If we look at the Rochester area, we have about 900 different houses of worship, and about 50% of our population says that they have a religious affiliation. So we can really see how we can magnify our impact by working together with each other. I think that's about it. I just would like to direct you all, if you have any questions, or if you'd like to find more information about us, please go to www.raica.net and click on the Become a Site Member button. And join our website so that you can stay up to date with us, and you can participate in our forums to share information and comment on information. We're also out there on Facebook and Twitter. You can find us there and also follow us. I think that's it for RAICA. Let's see what the next slide is. Yeah, so as I mentioned, this is part of our Words of Spirit Ways of Action series, and you can see all of them also at RAICA.net under Virtual Summit. We've had lots of different interesting topics, and I encourage you to go out. All the videos are out there and available for you to view. That's next slide. And with that, I'd like to introduce Mary Nichols, who is the Commercial Marketing Manager for GreenSpark, and take it away from there, Mary.
Thanks, Jackie. So thank you again for having me. I really appreciate being here with you all, and you all taking some time out of your day. I know some of us might have a little Zoom fatigue, so it really means a lot that you're taking the time to learn a little bit more about solar and see how we might be able to work together to make our community a little bit greener. So thank you. A little bit about me. My name is Mary Nichols. I'm the Commercial Marketing Manager at GreenSpark. I've been with the company for just under 5 years. Have had a couple different roles, but this one, the longest and most challenging, and I absolutely love it. So GreenSpark. So we are a local certified B-Corp, and our mission is really to create, bring clean energy to the community and have a really healthy balance between all of the stakeholders, the community, homeowners, business owners, the different, activists and community partners that we work with, just to create, a better balance for everyone involved, including the planet. A really big part of who we are is that B Corp certification. So it sort of holds us accountable to our word. So we can kind of talk the talk and say all these things, but being a certified B Corp really holds us to that. So we have to get recertified every 3 years by an independent third party, and the standards just grow, you know, harder and harder every year. So you have to pass some pretty rigorous standards of social and environmental accountability, transparency, pay your employees a living wage, and vow to use your business for a force for good. So some of the more well-known B-Corps are, you know, Patagonia, Ben and Jerry's. Locally in Rochester, there's really only a handful. So we're hoping that that grows. But again, it's something we're really proud of. A little bit more about us. I think on this slide, what's interesting is kind of, we run the gamut, right? So we'll do really large solar arrays for like Rochester Regional Health or home leasing or Corning, Cornell University. And we'll also do, you know, a tiny project on somebody's home. So we really run the gamut, and we're members of the Amicus Solar Cooperative, which is a member-owned solar cooperative of over 60 small to medium-sized solar companies from across the country. And it also includes Puerto Rico, Canada, and DC. So this kind of allows us to compete with those big national players, but aligning with more mission-driven companies. A lot of them are B Corps as well. We are currently headquartered out in Ontario, New York. We may be moving into the city within the next couple of years in an effort to kind of, you know, kind of better serve our community and diversify our workforce and all that good stuff. So we currently are powered by a sustainable microgrid, which is always fun. A few more pictures. We used to have a very open office environment. A lot of us have been working virtually over the past year, but where we're able to, we have electric cars and you know, upcycled furniture. And again, it's an open office environment. So some people really love that. It can be a little challenging at other times. Few of our customers, not going to spend too much time on that. So just to kind of provide a little bit of an, you know, overview of where we're at in the solar industry. So many of you have probably heard it's just growing exponentially. So within New York State in particular, we have some of the most aggressive climate goals in the entire country. So New York State has said that by 2030, 70% of our electricity will come from renewable energy. And by 2040, we'll have an entirely carbon-free electricity grid. So these are really ambitious goals. And as part of that, in order to complete that, they have incentives and grants available that really make solar very appealing on both a commercial and a residential level. So from a, actually both residential and commercial, there's a NYSERDA grant that's through the state. There's a federal investment tax credit for both residential and commercial of 26%. With you know, nonprofits, places of worship, that can be a bit challenging to recoup. Same with depreciation. So that's more for kind of for-profit entities. Solar installer is in the top 3 fastest growing jobs in the United States. The #1 job right now, I believe, is actually wind turbine technician. So both, you know, renewable energy on the whole is just really fast growing. So some of the benefits of solar in particular for houses of worship, immediate and long-term energy savings, right? So we're talking about electricity. You have a fixed cost when you go with solar, you know, you're able to budget, you're able to have a predictable cost, and you're able to protect yourself against the volatility and unpredictability of electricity rate hikes. So as many of you know, if you've, you know, looked at your RG&E bill or National Grid or wherever you may be, you know, those can increase or seem like they don't have much rhyme or reason at times. And this kind of allows you to gain some stability there. In the case of Heritage Christian Services, it was a really interesting case. So what they planned to do with their savings was to increase the wages of their employees. So it allows you to invest back in your community, invest back in your organization, and, you know, spend money where you'd rather spend it versus the utility. It also helps our local power grid and environment. So it increases the resiliency of our grid when we have less centralized power sources. You know, we go from having these giant centralized sources to having more localized sources of power that helps our power grid. And then increasingly, we're seeing that, you know, more and more stakeholders are putting pressure on, you know, a business, an organization, churches, temples, mosques, whatever it may be, to address climate change. People want to see this being done by the organizations that they're a part of. So it's just a great way to kind of satisfy that rising constituent demand. So for houses of worship in particular, we get a lot of interest from nonprofits and places that just don't have the tax liability. And it's been, you know, on our mind for years to come up with some sort of solution that we're able to offer to these organizations, because it pains us to turn people away when they want to go solar, and have money just be the main
Obstacle.
deterrent. Yes, thank you.
Oops.
We are currently working on a financing opportunity that we are hoping to have rolled out end of summer. I'd say conservatively end of year. I would hope that is complete, but basically this will allow us to provide a 10% discount to organizations. GreenSpark would own the project. It would go on your property. You'd have that instant savings without having to put up any money. So it's kind of a win-win. So we're working on that, more to come. If you'd like to stay in, I would encourage you to reach out to me. I'd love to chat and keep you in the loop. So with that said, our friend Jim Link is on the call. He joined us. Jim was really the project champion for Rochester Christian Reformed Church. So they actually had their solar array built this year, and is also a residential solar customer, so he can kind of answer questions from both angles there. But they were willing to share. This is a page of the proposal that we gave them to kind of show you what the financials could look like for your project. That being said, every project is different, so it might not be exactly the same. But in this case, the Rochester Christian Reformed Church spent about $3,600 or about $4,000 on electricity every year. And so for that size project, they needed a 33.75 kW solar system. And that's also what, you know, made sense for their roof. Every project includes a 25-year production warranty for the system, electronics warranty, really great panels that we use. We've vetted these companies to ensure that they can actually back these warranties. And then they all come with a 5-year parts and labor warranty as well. And what we're looking at here is a gross system price of $77,500. NYSERDA will kick in $15,188. And normally there's some tax incentives that you can take advantage of that, you know, knock off another 40%. But in this case, the net cost was around 62. The cash gained over the 25-year warranty, over $120,000, 5.5% rate of return, which isn't not bad for a very low risk investment, right? Where you're doing something great for the environment. And the payback is about 13.8 years. So again, for for-profits, you usually see numbers that are a little bit more conventionally strong, but this is still a very solid package. So I think, you know, Jim, if you wanted to comment here just on what your thought process was, and, how it came about and why your church kind of made that decision. Would love to hear that.
Hi, yeah. Our church is, there's nothing really particularly special about our church in that, we don't happen to be full of environmental engineers or something. You were talking about sort of rising constituent demand for climate action, and that's what happened in our church. To my knowledge, my wife and I are the only household in our church with solar power on our roof. But over the past 5 years or so, I've been talking to people at church about that. And I always say to them, thank you to you and all the other taxpayers of the state of New York for very generous financial incentives. Because, we bought a relatively small system for our house back in 2014. It cost almost $15,000 up front, but we ended up, after all the tax incentives, paying between $4,000 and $5,000. And so, this was the fall of 2014 when we installed, and we're right about where we're coming close to the end of the payback period for the system on our house. We had a Sunday school class in our church that was addressing sort of the concept of stewardship, and sort of what is it to be a human with responsibility for taking care of the planet God has given us. Out of that came a suggestion from some people who really don't have solar panels on their houses that maybe we should put a system on our church. And so they asked me about it and ended up then going to the church council and saying, this is something I think we really want to investigate. So the council said, that's fine, go ahead and do it and tell us what you find out. No commitment at that point. And this was about a year ago. Our church is maybe like others in that it moves very slowly and doesn't make decisions quickly at all. But over the course of last spring, we were able to investigate this, and we looked at, honestly, I have experience with GreenSpark, and I've really liked dealing with you folks. I don't have experience with any other installers, but we did kind of poke around and look for some others in the area. And it quickly became apparent to us that what we were looking for is really what GreenSpark was offering. And I think the main factor that tilted us toward GreenSpark, there were several, but the one that really stood out was there was no, upfront money involved in, well, do we have to pay $900 first for an engineering study to figure out whether our roof can support all this? And, that was all one. Sorry, can you all hear me still? Hello?
We can hear you.
Oh, okay. I had somebody else's audio coming over the top of everything. Where was I? Yeah, okay. So there was, it was kind of a one price for the whole project. And GreenSpark did basically all the thinking with us, rather than having us to go deal with different specialists to answer different questions. It took us probably 3 or 4 months before we were able to figure out whether it was feasible to answer questions like, what works for our church, a rooftop installation or a ground level installation? Well, that was in the end kind of a no-brainer. We have this big flat roof that's used for nothing else. So we answered that question pretty quickly. And then there was a kind of a long process of holding meetings within the congregation. And trying to work those out in ways so that we could hold those meetings outdoors in a pandemic or in some socially distanced way or over Zoom or whatever. And we wrote 3, I think, articles for various issues of the church monthly newsletter. And eventually, after explaining to the entire congregation what we were investigating, it became clear to our little feasibility committee that this was indeed a good idea for us, that it made both environmental and financial sense for us, that there were very few downsides. And so we went back to the council. One of the advocates for this turned out to be one of the elders on the council. And so he was our voice inside the body making the decision. Our pastor was also very supportive. And in the summer, our council kind of mulled this over and decided, in principle, yes, we like this. In fact, the vote was unanimous. And the proviso they added was that they wanted the whole congregation to weigh in on the decision. Well, that meant we had to wait until the congregational meeting, the annual meeting in early November, when we make a budget for the next year and make decisions about capital spending and that sort of thing. But when that vote was held, it was something like 75% to 15%, with the others offering no real decision at all, just saying, I can't decide or I have no opinion. So it was a real easy decision to make. It just took us a long time to make it. We then executed a contract with GreenSpark by the end of 2020. And that calls for, well, the installation you can see in the pictures is occurring right now. We're at the point where the panels are on the roof. We're waiting for the inverter to arrive and be installed. And at that point, we'll be ready to give it a go, I think, see how it works. We expect the whole thing maybe to be up and running by mid-May. And yeah, I love the rainbow back there too. So it's gone exceedingly well. And I just can't say enough good things about the crew that has installed for GreenSpark. They were very helpful and also very knowledgeable, the kind of people who can come in and explain themselves well, explain what they need, and help us figure out how we're going to do this, and then do it very quickly and efficiently. Right down to designating where in the parking lot we're going to park equipment, and you know, where we're going to put the ladders for roof access and all of that stuff. It's been a very good experience. And I should maybe stop talking at this point and just let other people ask questions if there are things I've missed. The one thing I should say is this ended up being something like peak production, this system of 34, say, kilowatts. And that's actually almost 10 times the size of the system on my house. So it involves 90 panels up there on a flat roof. Interestingly, they're not fastened to the roof or fastened through the roof. They're simply held down by weight on top of the roof. It's a ballasted system, and we had to pierce the roof in only one point, at only one point, to make a connection to our main utility room inside the building. And that's where we are right now, waiting to connect the panels on the roof to the inverter, which will be inside the building.
Perfect. Thank you, Jim. And I promise everyone, I did not tell him to say any of those things. That was really nice, though. I appreciate that. I think, Jackie, if it works with you, I'll just kind of breeze through these last few slides, and then we can sort of leave plenty of time for Q&A and see what
Yeah, that sounds great.
Great. So I just had a few case studies here. These are always fun to look at. We just built home leasing, pretty large array, 2.2 megawatts. So there's 1,000 kilowatts in 1 megawatt. So it's pretty large. And this will end up benefiting the home leasing affordable housing communities. Home leasing is also one of the handful of B Corps in the community. So this was a really neat project to get to partner with their organization. Turner Engineering and Woodbury Place Loft. So this is right in the heart of downtown Rochester, South Ave. General Motors, Rochester Regional Health. You can see the top right roof there, and the bottom right, those are also ballasted systems like the Rochester Christian Reformed Church. And then I also just want to take a few minutes to talk about solar for your home and how that works. So without going into too much detail, right? It's a super easy turnkey process, and that's our goal, is to make this really easy for people. So it works functionally and financially in much of the same way as commercial, but because, you know, these are much more cookie cutter, easier systems, and, you know, the incentives are largely similar in that they're covering, you know, anywhere from 60 to upwards of 70% of the system costs. So financially, it's definitely a very good time to explore the option if you are interested. You can have an analysis done, and we can kind of show you what it would look like for your home, how much you would save, what incentives you'd be able to recoup, how much cash you would gain over the 25-year warranty, as opposed to just kind of indefinitely paying the utility, which is really what you're currently doing, or most people are currently doing. We like to say that if you can afford to pay your electric bill, that you can really afford to go solar. So Jim kind of mentioned some of the, you know, what the incentives did for his project, but then on top of that, if you're eligible for financing, then you're talking about, you know, no upfront cost, right? We can do a bridge loan, and then there's other financing that, you know, the goal being to, once you get the system installed, you know, your electricity bill drops in price, and you kind of swap that out for your solar loan payment. So really you're looking at a wash in your month-to-month bills until you pay your system off, and then you're just pocketing that money. So happy to chat more about that, but that's kind of the very, very general overview. When we do the analysis, we'll look at how your home is oriented. Is it south, east, west facing? Are there a bunch of dormers? Are there trees around? You know, where are we going to be able to put the solar? Is it even viable? All those good things. So this is a map of the solar projects that we have across the state, really. The green are commercial projects, and the blue are all residential. So these are the residential solar incentives available, 26 federal tax credit. This was actually included in the stimulus package that was passed, I believe, December of last year. So they extended that tax credit through 2022, which is great. And then on top of that, there's a New York State tax credit of 25%. And then on top of that, NYSERDA through the state will kick in 35 cents a watt. It is a block grant, so that does change fairly quickly. So it may be at the next level down. I'm not completely sure, to be honest with you. Have to confirm that in conversation. And then this is our referral program, and something really cool. And in talking with Jackie, you know, RAICA would like the benefit to go to all of you, right? So if you did end up going solar, or a business ends up going solar, instead of that referral money going to RAICA, you can choose what you'd like to do with that. So whether that's putting that towards your church, towards a different organization that you might be passionate about, or honestly just putting it towards your system to lower that cost and kind of decrease your payback period. Those are all options. So if that's of interest, that's up for the taking. So at this point, I'd love to hear any questions that you all might have. I know that was a lot of information at once, but Jim and I are at your disposal here.
Thank you. That was great, Mary. I'll let you try and navigate. I don't see any hands going up, so maybe people will just unmute themselves, and if they have questions, go right ahead.
I have a question about residential. So our house has hot water heat, so radiators, and it's fueled by natural gas. And I'm wondering, is that something that can be converted with solar, or is it? I don't quite, I don't know all the details.
So my coworker Ryan Loyson is also on the call. So Ryan, feel free to chime in if you'd like to answer any of these. But solar really is just talking about electricity. So whatever runs on electricity, you're going to be able to hopefully offset those needs with the solar power. Some people do choose to, make some improvements before they install the solar power, whether that's putting in LED lighting to make sure, to kind of make sure that they're being as efficient as possible before putting the solar in, or transferring their heat to electricity. But I don't think that's too common, to be honest with you.
Okay.
Can I add something here? Our church has a lot more flat roof available to add panels in the future if we need to. And the one thought we had was RG&E has already said it will never sell more natural gas than it already does. That means that a whole lot of people are going to be converting from natural gas heat in the future to likely heat pumps, maybe geothermal heat pumps. And that's something that demands electricity, not natural gas. Our thought was we have the roof to support more panels. If it's at some point in the future, we switch from natural gas furnaces to geothermal heat pumps for our building. Honestly, I'm going to make the same consideration when my furnace quits, my natural gas furnace quits on my house. It's probably time to think about a heat pump. Mm-hmm. And then you're talking a big boost in your electricity usage and a big drop in your natural gas usage. In the chats, I saw some people asking about the roof. I take it the roof on our church building, and questions about whether putting the panels on the roof actually prolongs the life of the roof. Mary, you might be able to speak to that. We obviously have no information about what's happening on our church roof yet. The system has barely been put up there. My experience on my house roof is that the part that is shaded by solar panels is probably going to last a whole lot longer because it's shaded. The south-facing slope of my house roof is shaded probably at least 2/3 by panels, and there's a space of 3 to 4 inches, an air gap between the back of the panel and the face of the roof. That also keeps my house a lot cooler in the summer. I grow vines on the south wall of my house, and the panels shade the south roof of my house. And we almost never turn on any air conditioning during the day anymore in the summer. We expect that we will have to replace our church roof at some point during the life of the solar panels. And so we're going to be relying on GreenSpark to drive over, have a crew dismantle everything and take it off the roof, and then have our roofers come in and put down, it's right now a membrane, a big thick rubber membrane roof that's over insulation and a steel roof deck. They would come in and do the roofing work, and then we'd have GreenSpark come back in and reinstall all that. And we don't know exactly what that's going to cost, but we know it's going to cost, you know, something appreciable, and that will mean that my actual payback period will get longer by a couple of years, perhaps. Instead of 14 years, if we have to replace a roof in that time, maybe it's going to take us, I don't know, 16, 17 years to get our payback. But we can't exactly calculate that. We just know that however those numbers work out, we can't lose. You know, whatever the cost of putting on a new roof, taking off the system to put on a new roof and then reinstalling the system, we're still going to be ahead given the cost of our solar panels and the cost of removing and putting them back on a new roof in comparison to what we would be paying if we just got a monthly RG&E bill. I'm probably going to live long enough to see the point at which my church is actually making money on this deal.
Awesome, thanks, Jim. Sarah,
Hey,
did
Mary.
question?
Mary, this is Ryan. Can I interject for a moment?
Sure.
Circling back, this is Ryan, and I'm with GreenSpark as well, and Mary focuses on commercial marketing, and I focus on residential marketing. I've met a few of you before, so thanks for putting this together, everybody. There was a question about what solar panels would help you do at your house. And personally, I became a customer in 2016, became an employee in 2017. And the number one thing for me to understand really functionally how it works is you're tied to the grid, and your solar panels are tied in with your meter in your electricity box. So basically, you end up creating 2 meter readings, and you pay the difference between how much you draw from the grid and how much you send back to the grid. It's a very, very, very short version of all of that. But your solar panels are basically going to supplement and hopefully provide most of what your needs are. You produce your own solar electricity, and then any excess you send back to the grid. But you have that reliability because you're tied to the grid to draw electricity from the grid at nighttime or on a cloudy day or a rainy day, that sort of thing. So whatever appliances you have, whatever other systems you have, your solar array is basically tied in with your meter and with the grid. So that, for me personally, that was the number one thing to sort of comprehend is you're creating solar energy on your roof. If you need it, you use it. If you don't need it, you send it back to the grid. And that policy, that functionally, that turns into a policy called net metering, where, again, you are paying the difference between what you're drawing from the grid and what you're sending to the grid.
So Sarah next, and then Melissa.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions for Jim again. So you had 90 panels on the roof. What's the size of your congregation? With a membership?
Yeah, I guess the membership is in the like 250 range.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Wow.
And is the building used during the week or is it mostly just on the weekends?
Obviously, mostly during the weekends would be peak use, but there are events going on all week of one sort or another.
Yeah,
Typically there's an office staff there during the day every day. And then there are groups coming in to use the building occasionally during the day, more often in the evenings. And Wednesday evening, for example, tends to be a period of heavy use.
okay. And how many stories is it?
The whole building's one story.
Okay, all right. It seems like an ideal setup.
Well, yeah, what happened was our church burned down in 1982. And so at that point, we had to find a new site for a building. We knew it had to be a bigger building, and it also had to be a building where people could park cars. We had a city site where basically every Sunday morning, the neighborhood filled with the cars of church members clogging it up. So we ended up actually moving to Penfield, and a piece of land on Atlantic Avenue, right near we share a backyard with like Scribner Road and Bay Trail schools in the Penfield School District. And we were able then to build in 1984 and 5, all on one level. So it was all handicap accessible. And even the sanctuary, there just aren't any steps in the building. I guess the only steps are 3 steps to get you up to the pulpit. That's it. It's spread out. I talk a lot, don't I? There was a short answer to that question, but I gave you the long one.
Thank you.
Did you have more questions?
Melissa,
I'm a partner in Rochester, and we sell renewable energy for municipalities, being all the residents in a municipality. So that's my first answer to Sean, is that if you don't have solar on your building, then you can join community solar. When I explain solar to people, I say you have 3 options. You got a lot of time and money and effort to do an upfront cost, put on your roof. If you got a little bit of effort, put it on your, join a community solar program, and there's payback. If you don't have any time and energy, tell your community to do a CCA program. And that is happening, hopefully, in Penfield. They haven't chosen an administrator yet. That is electric supply. And that hopefully will happen for all of Rochester, residents and small businesses this summer, and some surrounding communities. When that happens in your community, you can still do community solar. The two play together well. So you can, people who have community solar involvement can still be involved in a CCA for the whole town. So they go together. I also want to say I'm getting geothermal next month. So I'm one of those people going all electric. Just my house.
Would that apply? We have Fairport Electric, and when I looked into buying into a community solar, they said no, they wouldn't work with Fairport Electric. Is that would that work with the solar panels you're describing?
when you say you mean Melissa's Rochester?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We won't come to Fairport either.
Okay.
When you pay your utility bill, there's something called the service benefit charge that everybody pays into, kind of like a little tax, and that's where the 10% discount comes in. Fairport Electric doesn't pay that, so you don't get to reap the benefits of that.
But you could do
Airport Electric, it's also challenging. You can't really go solar on your rooftop either, unless you're, you have to be RG&E. So that's kind of hard as well. There are a couple questions in the chat that I just wanted to make sure that I got to. So Ellen asked if a solar array produces more energy over a year than the building energy uses. Does solar energy does that credit roll over as a credit for future use? Great question. The answer is yes. So when we're sizing a system, we're going to do everything in our power to make sure it's, as close to 100% as possible. It's not really worth it to overproduce too much. So we want to size it properly, but in the case that you were really great with your energy use in a certain year and you had some extra credit, that would just roll over and kind of be applied to the next time that you needed that credit. So that is a good question. And then as well, another one, sorry, up top here.
Can I interrupt, Mary?
Sure.
I wonder if this would be the time to explain what a true update is. And I mean, when I had to choose a true update with RG&E as my rooftop system was installed, they were very helpful in helping me choose a date that was to my advantage, but it ended up being as close to the vernal equinox as possible. And I think that'll be the case for most people. My understanding of how it works is, if you start your year right around the vernal equinox in the spring, first day of spring, and you build up a credit all the way through the summer by producing more than you use. And then you start to use that up on into the fall, so that at the end of the winter, you've used it all up, in my case, and I'm actually buying green power through an RG&E program at the end of the winter for that purpose. But if in March, in that last bill, I happen to make more power in that last month before my true up date, if I happen to make more power than I use, that power is lost to me. It simply goes off into the grid and we start over at zero and start a new year. Is it your understanding that that's how it works on an annual basis for everybody? I don't know the answer to that.
I mean, I think here I would talk a little bit about net metering, which is a New York State policy that says basically when the spring, summer, and fall, when we're getting more sunshine in your systems, having that excess production, you're going to build up credits, and then those credits will be applied in the winter. And so really, it all kind of balances out on an annual basis. I don't really know. Does that get to what you're asking?
Yeah, I mean, I think in that last month, in the month of February, March, my panels actually made, say, 40 kilowatt hours more than we use. And then we hit the true update and I lost that. It disappeared from my bank, and I start over with a new year. And we go into the first month, the March, April month of my new year, and I'll again produce more power than we use. So we'll start building up a new bank. But at the end of, in a year from now, when we hit the true update, if there's anything left in my bank, then it just disappears. And that would be one reason why you don't want to overbuild your system. You don't want to pay for a system that produces 120% of what you use typically, because you'd build up enough of a credit so that you might have a lot to lose at the end of a year.
I'd be curious if Ryan's still on, because my understanding is that it should roll over.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, so that's interesting.
Maybe RG&E did something on that bill that I was, that should not have happened.
It wouldn't be the first time, but maybe I'm wrong. That also
Okay.
won't be the first time. So
On my system, I get paid back for extra, but when I buy electricity, I'm buying it 4.5 cents. When I get paid back by RG&E, I get 2 cents.
Right, and that's why it's not financially worth it, because they basically pay you back at a wholesale rate. So kind of rapid fire, a couple questions. I think Ellen was asking basically if you don't have a good roof, you know, you have too much shade or a wrong orientation, is there a program where a homeowner could buy solar panels on a solar farm with no shading? And I think Melissa kind of touched on this before, but I think the best alternative at this point for folks in that situation where they can't get rooftop solar is to join a community solar farm or, you know, through a community choice aggregation. You know, if your town is in that, then you're able to take advantage of hopefully clean local power that is provided to your town. There is, I just wanted to call out when Melissa mentioned kind of the 3 different options, a really big important difference between, you know, solar on your roof versus community solar is that one is an ownership option and one is not. And so community solar is really great because it really does open up accessibility to a lot of folks and allows solar to get out there at a really rapid pace. And typically you're seeing 10% savings, which is awesome. When you're in a position where you can put it on your roof and you can own it, your return on investment is much higher. So I think that's an important difference to point out there. Dave asked about a minimum amount of kilowatts that he'd have to use in order to justify having panels installed. I'll say for GreenSpark, we don't typically install projects that are less than 8 panels. And that's really just economics is the driver of that. You know, at a certain point, it's going to be as economically beneficial to really any party involved when you're getting a system that small. So that ends up being around 3 kW. You're kind of towing that line. But that being said, you know, sometimes we have installed smaller systems, so we can always chat and see what we can do to help you out and point you in the right direction, even if it's something that we might not end up doing ourselves. Are there any other questions?
3 questions?
So I have another question. The panels last for like 25, 30 years is my understanding. Is that right?
The panels are warranted for our projects. The panels are warranted for 25 years. They have a production warranty. So, you know, with that, it says the panels have to produce at this amount. They're not allowed to degrade more than a tiny percentage every year. So that's pretty great. We expect them, most systems, to last more like 30, 40 years. Potentially longer, but they just, you know, they slowly lose a little bit of efficiency over time. So at year 40, they're definitely not going to be operating at quite the same efficiency as they are year 10, for example.
All right, thanks.
Mm-hmm. So another question for nonprofit organizations such as churches: can financing of a solar project take advantage of for-profit investments, tax credits, and bonus depreciation? Typically not. So with churches, we've seen, you know, again, that they just have found that the financials as is were still worth it. What we're kind of working on is sort of a power purchase agreement option for churches and other and underserved kind of organizations that might typically have some challenges getting financed through more conventional methods. And so we're kind of looking to be able to back those projects and get the clean energy to to churches and different organizations.
And
That's
just to interject,
program I was
you're-
talking about.
that is another option for nonprofits, is if they have a member of their congregation or a patron in their community that does have a tax liability and can take advantage of it, as well as the depreciation, then they could do the financing and structure a power purchase agreement that way.
True. And also, if you have a nonprofit like Heritage Christian Services or Rochester Regional Health, like a larger institution, they can also do community solar pretty easily. It's the smaller, mid-sized
Yeah.
organizations that typically have the
So
tougher times.
I just want to make sure we get to Anna's question about Fairport. So no, there are no options really for Fairport at this time?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
Unless you're on RG&E. If you're on, if RG&E is your utility, then you can do it all. But with Fairport Electric, unfortunately, the way that their things are structured there, it's not really conducive to solar power.
So we do have one last question to get into a little bit more detail about options for nonprofits. Before we do that, I want to just, again, we kind of, on our webinars, we've typically been giving away prizes at the end. So we had, often we would ask questions, and maybe the first person to answer the question, we give away a prize. Anything from power strips to light bulbs to, food storage aids, depending on the theme. So as Mary covered, for this webinar, our prize for all of you is that, the referral fee ranging from, I think it was $300, or was it $250?
It's $250 for a resident.
$250 for residential, and range up to several thousand depending on the size of the project for commercial. We're turning that back over to you. So if you as a result of this webinar decide to go solar, that's our gift to you to try and offer an additional incentive. So with that, let's see if we can get back to Ellen's question. And I guess for those that need to leave at 8 o'clock, they're welcome to go. And I think we have the line for a little bit longer, about 15 minutes longer, if we want to stick around for some more questions. I don't know if that works for you, Mary.
Sure. So with a power purchase agreement, the way those are structured is a third party will own the project. And then basically, the PPA customer doesn't pay anything up front. They don't own the system. They don't have to worry about operations or maintenance or anything like that. You're basically signing a typically 20 to 25-year agreement that says, I'm going to be paying this rate for clean local solar power at a discount. And you know exactly what your rate is going to be over the next 20 to 25 years. So the really big advantage there is, a fixed cost, reduced costs, 10% savings. So that can work out really well for organizations that have these clean energy goals. And it's honestly, it can be just a really easy way to get those done while having a little bit of savings. And again, being able to budget for your organization. So those are typically kind of the main appeals of a power purchase agreement. Some for-profits do them as well for those reasons, but they're definitely appealing for larger institutions as well that don't have the tax liability.
And I don't really know of any local cases, but through the interfaith community, we know of other case studies where you really can set it up any way you want. So if you have someone that can use the liability and wants to finance the project, you can structure it any way you want. If they want to give more benefit or sell it back after the depreciation to the church and things like that. So the large institutions are going through kind of a standard institutional financing, but you can also do whatever you want if you've got somebody that has a need for the liability and wants to finance the project. I also noticed this note here in the chat for you, Jim. Did you notice that?
I did see that, yes. You want some contact information now, or I can provide it later?
Yeah, I think you could go ahead and put it in the chat if you're comfortable with that, or you could send
I'll
it
do
directly
that.
to Sean, whichever you prefer. All right, unfortunately, I'm gonna have to go because my family's waiting for dinner, but Sarah is the co-host if you wanted to continue a little longer, or I don't know if there are any more questions.
Just kind of do one last sweep if anyone has any final questions. Otherwise, I'd love to talk with anyone who's interested. If you're interested in getting a free quote or just chatting about what might work for your organization or for your home, happy to talk it through.
Well, many thanks to the presenters and to the audience. It's been lovely.
You know,
Thanks for having us.
thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you
I'm
for
gonna-
having us.
I'll close the meeting. Oh, I can't close it. There we go. Okay, I'm ending meeting for all. Bye.